Girivardhari Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Balaba Girivardhari Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Balaba Girivardhari Yasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Krishnarupa. I live up near New Govardhan, and I'm very delighted to be given the opportunity to speak to you today. So I always like to read the word-for-word translation of that beautiful bhajan that Prabhupada loved to sing and always sang. So its translation is, Krishna is the lover of Radha. He displays many amorous pastimes in the groves of Vrindavan. He is the lover of the cowherd maidens of Vraja and the holder of the great hill named Govardhan. He is the beloved son of Mother Yasoda, the delighter of the inhabitants of Vraja, and he wanders in the forests along the banks of the river Jamuna. And of course, you're probably aware that one time in Mayapur, and I was present there, and Srila Prabhupada was singing this bhajan, and he went into ecstasy. And Prabhupada always very tightly controlled his ecstatic emotions because we wouldn't understand. And Prabhupada was chanting this and he suddenly went silent. And I remember we were looking at each other like, what's happening? Is Prabhupada having, a heart attack or stroke? We didn't know. And then Prabhupada was just so deeply immersed in this ecstatic feelings, meditating on Krishna and the inhabitants of Vraja and the groves of Vrindavan. And then after maybe a couple of minutes, Hansaduta started doing a kirtan. And Prabhupada came out of his samadhi, I guess you could say. And after a while, after some of the senior, sannyasis were saying, why did you disturb Prabhupada? You should have just let him remain in that ecstatic trance. And others went, no, it was good that you brought him back. But I think this only happened twice. Another time was in America, and Prabhupada was very, very strictly controlling his feelings of ecstasy. So whenever I sing that song, I always think of that, of Srila Prabhupada doing that. Nashta prayeshu bhajeshu nityam bhagavat sevaya bhagavate uttama shloke bhakti bhavati nashtaki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome in the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, whose praise with transcendental songs is established as an irrevocable fact. So gathering here in class and listening to Bhagavatam is so spiritually powerful. And whenever you can, try and attend. Of course, these are online recorded, so if you can't be in the temple, but there's nothing like sitting together in an assembly of devotees and listening to Bhagavatam. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narotanam devim sarasvatim vyasam tato jayam udirayat. Before reciting the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Nara Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Sarasvati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnana Timiranjasya Gyanangana Shalakaya Chakshuan Militam Dena Tasmaya Sri Gurave Namaha. So welcome everyone to our daily Bhagavatam reading. And today we'll be discussing 9th Canto, chapter 19, verse 13. Correct? And also it's the disappearance day of Narottam Das Thakur, who was a great Acharya, and we sing so many of his beautiful bhajans. So I'll mention a little bit about him at the end of the talk. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here at Mahaprabhu Mandir. Radha Vallabha are very special to me. They were the very first deities I ever had the privilege of seeing back in 1973, I think, when they were installed in Burnett Street. And my hosts, who are so generously and kindly hosting me, they're going to take me there tomorrow so I can see at least the facade of 14 Burnett Street, which no doubt will bring back a flood of wonderful memories. So I pray at their lotus feet, Radha Vallabha's lotus feet, the feet of Jagannath Baladev Subhadra, the feet of Gaunitai, that I may repeat what I've heard despite my total lack of qualifications. And there's a purport in 1st Canto, chapter 15, verse 21, in this purport that I meditate a lot on, and I think it's something that we can all reflect on and get a lot of realizations from. And in the purport, Prabhupada says this: as we have discussed more than once, one should not be puffed up by borrowed plumes, like the plumes of the ostrich, or the peacock, because all energies and powers are derived from the Supreme Source, Lord Krishna, and act as long as he desires and cease to function as soon as he withdraws. So we can't go around, it's foolish to go around thinking, all of our efforts are from our own strength, from our own talents, from our own good ideas. No, they're all borrowed plumes. And then if we thinking that way, then we remain humble, we don't get puffed up. Oh, I'm really good at doing this, or I'm really good at doing that, and this is my service and I'm so important, etc., etc. They're all borrowed plumes. And Krishna he supplies, just like that verse in Gita, and he can withdraw. So after all, everything that Krishna, his power is so unlimited that he induces the living entity to take up devotional service. And any service that we want to do, he has to sanction. So at every step of the way, we're under the control of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And I really, I get a lot out of that purport. So it's 1st Canto, chapter 15, verse 21 in the purport. You might like to, I have it printed out and it's stuck on my fridge door. So every time I open my fridge door, I read a number of prayers that are on there, and that's always there. And it's very centering and makes you have a good realization that we are all acting just on the borrowed plumes. And it's by Krishna's grace that we can perform any service that might be pleasing to him. So it's a little bit like the father might give some pocket money to the child. And then on the father's birthday, the child will very proudly give his father a birthday present. Oh, I bought this for you, Papa. But actually, it was the father's money to begin with. So that's a nice example that we can think of. So it's all borrowed plumes, and we must not be puffed up in thinking we're so important. And my little 4-year-old granddaughter and I have this joke that we share. And she goes, oh, what are you doing, Daddy? And I'll go, oh, I'm going to Melbourne, or I'm here, there's a picture, or I'm giving a class. And then she kind of smirks and goes, oh, you're being so important. So we have this joke that whenever there's anything I do, and she goes, oh, you're so important. And she laughs because she knows it's a joke, that we have this little in-house joke. So now let's read verse 13. Yat pritivyam vrihi yavam, yat pritivyam vrihi yavam, hiranyam pashavastriya, hiranyam pashavastriya, naduyanti manapritim, nadunati madapritim, pumsa kama hatasyate. Yat pritivyam vrihi yavam, hiranyam pashavastriya, naduyanti manapritim, pumsa kama hatasyate. Prabhus? Pasavastriya, yad pritivyam vrihyam, hiranyam pashavastriya, naduyanti manapritim, pumsa kama hatasyate. Vaishnavis? Yad pritivyam vrivavam, hiranyam pashavastriya, naduyanti manapritim, pumsa kama hatasyate. One more. Yad pritivyam vrihi yavam, hiranyam pasavastriya, naduyanti manapritim, pumsa kama hatasyate. Please repeat after me. Yat. What? Pritivyam. Within this world. Vrihi. Food, grains. Rice. Yavam, barley. Hiranyam, gold. Pashava, animals. Striya, wives or other women. Naduyanti, do not give. Mana pritim, satisfaction of the mind. Pumsa, to a person. Kamahatasya, because of being victimized by lusty desires. Te, they. Translation. A person who is lusty cannot satisfy his mind even if he has enough of everything in the world, in this world, including rice, barley and other food grains, gold, animals and women. Nothing can satisfy him. Repeat after me. A person who is lusty cannot satisfy his mind even if he has enough of everything in this world, including rice, barley, and other food grains, gold, animals, and women. Nothing can satisfy him. So we'll read the purport. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Improvement of one's economic condition is the aim and object of a materialist, but there is no end to this material advancement. For if one cannot control his lusty desires, he will never be pleased, even if he gets all the material wealth of the world. In this age, we see much material improvement, but still people are struggling to get more and more material opulence. Mana sastanindriyani prakriti stani karshati. Although every living entity is a part of the Supreme Being, because of lusty desires, one continuously struggles for so-called betterment of one's economic condition. To have a satisfied mind, one must give up his heart disease of lusty desires. This can be done only when one is Krishna conscious. And this is a quote from 10th Canto, chapter 33, verse 39. Bhaktim param bhagavati pratilabhya kaman ridrogam ashvabhin norti achirena dira. If one becomes Krishna conscious, then he can give up this heart disease. Otherwise, this disease of lusty desires will continue, and one cannot have peace in his mind. So this chapter is entitled King Yayati Achieves Liberation. And so you would have been reading in this previous chapter the story of King Yayati. He had 5 sons, and his youngest son Puru accepted Jayanti Maharaj's invalidity of old age, so his father could try and enjoy his senses longer. So which one of you girls would give your youth to your grandma so that she can again be young? Pretty big ask, isn't it? So, you know, if your father came along and said, okay, I'm not having fun any longer, son, please take my invalidity. And your son would go, oh, forget it, Dad. No way. So, just to refresh a little in this chapter, so Yayati married Śrīmad daughter Devayani, and she had a friend called Samista, the daughter of Vishvaparva. And like many young girls and young boys, they had a squabble. And that squabble became quite vengeful. And the boys also have squabbles, so I'm not being gender biased here. Girls, don't feel you're alone in this. So going back before Devayani's marriage to King Yayati, many of her friends and Samista's friends were frolicking in the water. They're having fun in the water. And all of a sudden Lord Shiva came along. So they quickly put on their more clothes, or, you know, modestly dressed, but by mistake, what did Samista do? Can anyone remember? Yes, she took Devayani's clothes. So clearly they weren't into clothes swapping. Probably a lot of the gentlemen probably don't do that, but the ladies might go, oh, can I wear that sari of yours to this occasion? Or, oh, can I borrow your outfit so I can go somewhere? And, you know, they'll quite happily exchange their wardrobe temporarily. But Devayani didn't like that. So they were, you know, had a huge fight. And what did Samista do? She threw Devayani into a well. So it became, from a little squabble, it became murderous. And then along comes King Jayati wanting to drink water from the well, and he rescues her, Devayani, and marries her. So before the marriage, what did Devayani do? She didn't just keep it into herself. She went to her father and said, Papa, look what she's done to me. She's tried to kill me, threw me in the well. So what did the father do? Then he had a fight with Samista's father. And there was a big confrontation there. So in order to placate Śrīmad, who's very, very powerful, Vishvaparva, he goes, okay, when Devayani's married, I will give my daughter as her maidservant. So that must have really stuck in the throat for Samista, that she had to become the maidservant of this girl that she actually tried to kill. So they go along, they get married, they go along. And then Devayani, naturally, she becomes pregnant. And Samista, she also wants to have a baby. So she approaches Maharaj Jayati, and as a Kshatriya, it's his duty to placate her senses, and she also has a child. So what happens? Do you think Devayani took that lightly? No. All hell broke loose, and she went back to her father Śrīmad complaining about this. And Śrīmad cursed Samista's father that you will age, you will become old. I'm sorry, Jayati would become old. So then he pleads for mercy. And when you read Bhagavatam, you find this a lot. A sage will curse someone who's overstepped the line or displeased them, and the curse will be really, really so heavy. And then the recipient or the victim of the curse will beg for mercy, and then they'll lighten the curse a little bit. I've not read anywhere where they fully retract the curse, because the curse once given, especially by these powerful brahmanas, you can't retract. And I remember once in Mayapur, there was some fracas with some ladies, and one lady cursed the other lady. And when His Holiness Jayapataka Maharaj heard about that, he said, if you don't go immediately to the person whom you cursed and offer your obeisances, whatever you curse this person to suffer, you will have to suffer. So that was very interesting. So Yayati's curse was less severe because he said, okay, if you can get someone to take your invalidity of this sudden old age, then you can become young again. And he approached his son Puru. So this is like, he had so many years of sense enjoyment. Everything he did, he wanted more and more and more. He was not placated, he was not satisfied. So this desire to increase your enjoyment, your objects, everything, there's no peace, there's no satisfaction. So then he, in this verse, he finally has what I call a light bulb moment. Have you ever had that when you're performing your service or you're going on with your life and suddenly you have a really powerful realization? It's like someone went flick on the light switch and then you suddenly can change. And I had that light bulb moment when I was 17. And, you know, I was raised in a typical Australian family. We weren't vegetarian. And I had a friend in the shared house that I stayed in who was into Zen Buddhism, and he was a vegetarian. Now, you'll be surprised, but in Australia, there were very few vegetarians in the 70s. Very, very few. In St Kilda, there was one vegetarian restaurant, and that's it. So, you know, it was quite new, of course, until devotees came and, you know, that increased. So this friend came and he said, look what you're eating a dead body. And it was like the light went on and I had a complete realization that yes, and I know it sounds funny because of course we know that it's a dead animal that we're eating, but for Westerners it didn't relate. This is something that you grew up and your parents fed that to you and you accepted it. And when he said that, I just immediately had this great flash of realization, and I picked up my plate, threw it in the bin, and then I became a vegetarian from that second on. And of course I didn't know what I should eat, so I lived on, you know, steamed vegetables and brown rice. And my mother was convinced that I was going to die. And then I had the great fortune of meeting devotees, and I remember the first Sunday feast I went to, or the first visit to the temple in 14 Burnett Street, and they served the Sunday feast, and I was absolutely astonished that, oh, this is what you can do as a vegetarian. So that was a big light bulb moment. Has anyone had that light bulb moment? You know, somehow by Krishna's mercy you get a flash of realization and understanding. So in the previous chapter, King Ayati had created this allegory of the female goat, and he was the male goat to, you know, teach his wife, to give some understanding. And what was that lesson? The lesson is no matter how much material enjoyment, and Prabhupada explains, or it's explained in this verse, that you try and have, it never results in real satisfaction. You you think, oh, if I can just get this car, I can get that house, if I can get that wife, if I can get that husband, if I can get that degree, if I can get that job. And then you get it, and there's always something lacking. And that lacking is because we are by nature spirit. So anything that's material doesn't give us peace. And when you hanker for more and more and more, it just increases that fire of material desire and no satisfaction in the mind. So in Śrīmad Bhāgavatam explains that balance, there's an imbalance. So you may gratify your senses, and generally sense gratification, there's some sin around it. But do you get the equal sinful reaction? No. It's very unfair. You actually suffer more than what you enjoy. So you can imagine a scale, when the old-fashioned scale when you're weighing something, this is the weight you put on and that's your sense gratification. And what's the scale reaction? It's not that, it's that. So we always suffer more than we actually enjoy, and that's explained in Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. So, we might have a level of 50%, but our suffering's not going to be 50%. It's going to be much, much higher. Far outweighs our level of so-called enjoyment. Just like a person who overindulges in eating, what happens? They get gout, or they get, stomach trouble, and then they're destined to eat, plain vegetables with no butter, and if they're lucky, a bit of salt, which would be terrible for devotees. And in verse 12, King Yayati explains to Devyayani, his wife, that he was just like a male goat who gets himself into so much trouble. And in this verse, he explains that, he's had this light bulb moment now. He's been impacted and he's got realizations. And he says that no matter how many food grains you have, no matter how much gold you have, no matter how many, a beautiful wife, a beautiful husband, that there's how many cows, animals you have, you won't be satisfied. No, there's no satisfaction. And Krishna consciousness is so nice that we can dovetail pretty much everything in Krishna's service. And, we may desire beautiful clothes, beautiful silk saris. And yes, it's nice, you have a nice silk sari. But what's a satisfaction is so much more when you give that to Radha Vallabha. You feel completely satisfied then. And I remember once I gave one of my daughters-in-law some perfume, really beautiful, expensive perfume as a gift. And if someone gave me that, I'd go, oh, thanks. But she immediately took it and offered it to her deities because she had been trained since her childhood to do that. So it was a light bulb moment for me too. I was like, oh, actually, I should make sure I offer these things to my deities first. So Krishna consciousness, we can dovetail so much, and we do actually get real satisfaction, and we can have our families, and we can have children, and we raise our children in a gentle, loving way to serve Krishna. And I can see that with my host family, how nicely that family environment is, how gentle they are with their daughter, and she's very inspired to do kirtan and do the artis, and it's such a genuine way of life. The forcing thing doesn't work, and when you force children, force them to chant, force them to do this or do that, then as they grow they become resentful, and then they won't have a bar of it. So when I was preparing for this class, if you look in the Bhagavad Gita's index, there's like a whole page or column and a half all about lust. And before, we had the internet and we could easily Google what does, database say. The way I would research and study would be looking up the index of all the books. And then I'd write the relevant numbers and I'd look them in. So I thought, oh, let's have a look at how many columns there are. And it's many, many. You can look in your hard copy Bhagavad Gita. There's many, many entries, you know. And Prabhupada explains in text 41 purport in Gita that lust is only the perverted reflection of the love of God, which is natural for every living entity. So that lust, and lust is not just for sex life, it's for wealth, power, opulence, you know, control. That's all lust in its different faces. And that's simply, it's a perverted reflection of our relationship with Krishna. And because we've drawn away from Krishna, we've become in competition with Krishna in our conditioned state, then we're always trying to find the juice somewhere, find that ras. And we're so fortunate by Prabhupada's mercy that we can feel that great deep satisfaction when we're serving Krishna. And, you know, when we commit, or when we try and enjoy our senses, and particularly if there's some sin involved, then what happens? It's not that the sin is left there. It actually leaves a seed, and there's a desire to sin more. That's the cruel nature that, you know, we might have a fall down and rectify ourselves. But by that fall down, that seed has sown in the heart. And again, we might fall down. So it's very, very important to stay strict and to stay strong. So, and what happens when lust, it's the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world, as Krishna says, Kama esha, Krodha esha, Raja guna samudvana, bhava, mahasa no mama papma, vijyanam iha verinam. 3:37. The Supreme Personality of God said, "It is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world." So naturally we're going to meet frustration. We're not going to get what we want. And then what happens when we're frustrated? Becomes anger. Kama, Krodha. And, you know, we're seeing this in the material world where there may be, a man might be very attracted to a lady. But when she rejects him or doesn't want to have anything to do with him, then what happens? He becomes angry, he stalks her, he makes her life miserable. So that lust transforms into frustration and then anger. So really there's no satisfaction, no matter how much you try, when you're trying to satisfy your material senses. And as Prabhupada mentions here, there's no peace in mind. There's no peace in your heart. You're just tormented. It's like, you know, King Jayati is sharing his life's experience in this chapter. And he's been there and he's done that now. And now he's like, right, well, what should I be doing? I've really wasted a lot of time. I've really messed up my life. Now what should I do? So this life bulb moment, the penny dropped, and he's realised the uselessness of his pursuits because there isn't any satisfaction. So we might think, oh, if I get, you know, trade my Toyota Corolla to a BMW, then, you know, I'll feel better. If I move into a big, big house, then I'll feel better. I'll feel like I've achieved something. But there's always the downside. You know, you've got to worry about paying the property taxes. You've got to worry about cleaning the 10 rooms when really just having 3 rooms would have been fine. You know, if I've got lots of money in the bank or in my portfolio, then, oh, what's going to happen to it? Then you're obsessed with, you know, checking the shares all the time, and, you know, you have big losses. And, of course, then there's the scams. And I was talking to my host family last night we were talking about how there's so much cheating going on in this material world. There's always been cheating, But now it's becoming more and more and more sophisticated, where people are losing their life savings. And I recently got scammed for $380. And I got a message on my phone saying, "Mum, I've dropped my phone in the sink. I've got to get another phone. But my card's not working. Can you pay for it? And then I'll put it back. You know, this is the account number for the person." And I immediately went into mother, you know, fight mode. Oh yes, I have to help my son immediately. And started doing all this thing. I couldn't get through to his wife to confirm what was going on. And I can imagine he's washing the dishes, which he does, and then the phone falling in the sink. And anyway, cut a long story short, I got ripped off for $380, but they tried to rip me off for $1,800, but in 2 separate transactions. But luckily, my bank put a hold on it. And then finally, after an hour of this, I managed to get hold of my son. And I said, "You know, what happened with your phone?" He's saying, "What are you talking about, Mum? There's nothing wrong with my phone." And then, it's still at this point, I wasn't sure I'd been scammed. He said, "No, you've been scammed. Immediately ring the bank and cancel all your cards." So the level of sophistication for these cheaters is so horrific. Because that desire, they've got this desire, they've got to, you know, their greed has become all-devouring, and they've lost all sight of what is the proper behaviour of a human being. So, so that desire to enjoy like Krishna, we're in competition with Krishna, and that started our long sojourn in this material world. Pretty much time immemorial that we've been here. And how lucky we are that we have Srila Prabhupada, who's pulled us out, sometimes pulled us out kicking, but he's, you know, we have these wonderful temples, we have the wonderful association of devotees, and it's giving us a peaceful heart. And, you know, it's just like I was saying before, that lust is also it's in many forms, for greed, for power, for accumulation, for control. And I was mentioning this to my host family, and I was saying I was just like Imelda Marcos with all of her shoes. And I got a blank look, and I said, "Oh, you don't know who Imelda Marcos was." So she was for those who don't know, in the 70s, I think it was, she was the wife of the president of the Philippines. And their prolific wasting of their people's money pretty much sent the country bankrupt. And there was a coup and they had to leave. And when they did a tally, it was 1965 to 86, and when they fled into exile, they did a tally, and she had, I have to tell you this, is so funny. She had 1,060 pairs of shoes. Her wardrobe included 15 mink coats. Now the Philippines is hot, right? 508 gowns and 888 handbags. And she plummeted the country into massive debt. That was just one aspect of it. There were so many others. So, you know, we can, that greed that she had to try and accumulate and have all of these things, she would not have been happy. It ended in disaster for her and her husband. And the lavish spending crippled the country's economy. So lust, karma, causes a living entity to chase sensual enjoyment through body, family, wealth, power. In trying to satisfy our lust and greed, we become frustrated, ends in anger and deeper entanglement. And, you know, we look at the battlefield for Kurukshetra. You know, what was that? That was all based on Duryodhana's greed and lust. He wouldn't share even, you know, the amount of land that was on the pin of a head with the Pandavas, even though they were the rightful heirs. Yudhisthira should have been going to him. And now we're surrounded by lots of mini Duryodhanas, you know, the scam artists and the cheaters and, you know, people who will do anything for their domination and greed. And of course, you know, with the battlefield of Kurukshetra, so many lives were lost, so many children were fatherless, so many wives were widowed. It had, you know, of course, annihilated the miscreants. That's very good. But Duryodhana was, you know, that chief instigator. So there's a big gap between the haves and the have-nots. And if you go and visit Murwillumbah, where I live, there's still people, families living in their cars. There's, you know, you walk along Tweed River to chant some japa, and then you see people and children living out of cars because their home was lost during the floods, or rentals have become incredibly expensive, and buying property is beyond the scope of the average person who lives in Murwillumbah. So in Sri Ishapanishad, the first mantra, it says, Ishavashamidam sarvan yat kinsha jagatam jagat tena chaktena vunjitaha magrita kasya sviddanam. Everything animate. Anyone know this verse? You can say it with me. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, and one should accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. So that's a really nice mantra to meditate on, that what we are going to achieve through our karmic destiny, we will achieve it. No matter how much we try, if it's not within our destiny, it's not going to work, no matter what endeavour. But when we're focusing on Krishna consciousness, we're maintaining, you know, our families need to be maintained nicely. It's not that you plunge yourself into, you know, poverty because, oh no, I can't own anything. No, a responsibility is to create a healthy, safe environment for our families. There's nothing wrong with that. But we don't need to accumulate so much. And you see sometimes that very, very wealthy people, they start giving away their wealth. Because they have so much, what can they do with it anyway? And they're not happy. So they, you know, give it away as charity. Be nice if they gave it to the temples, but we have, Ambarish Das, who has donated so many millions of dollars. He comes from the famous Ford family who created the motor car in America. And I recently saw on Facebook that he's committed to another 10 million. So the TOVP will be ready, I think 2027, is that the goal or something like that? But, you know, that's a very good use of his wealth. So in 3rd Canto, chapter 30, verse 2, it says, whatever is produced by the materialist with great pain and labour for so-called happiness, the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the time factor destroys, and for this reason the conditioned soul laments. So even if you've achieved all your material goals, can't take it with you, can you? You lose it all anyway. And you know, the life of a miser is it's very unfortunate. And Prabhupada tells a story of one of his acquaintances when he was on his deathbed. The friend was on his deathbed, and he's pleading with the doctor, oh dear doctor, I just need 5 more years. Do something, help me. I just want 5 more years so I can finish, you know, my project or whatever. But time and tide wait for no man. So of course he expired. And Prabhupada often gives that story. And the famous Chaucer, the English poet from, you know, previous centuries, he says, time and tide wait for no man. And then in the 11th canto, we look at the example of Avanti Brahmana. And he was very rich and gifted with opulence, but his home was devoid of any comfort. He was such a miser that he kept it all to himself, and his family members were living in a very deprived situation. And he wouldn't even allow, you know, his sons, his family, and they started to feel very inimical towards him.
then he lost all of his wealth, and he felt great pain and lamentation. And then he suddenly became very renounced. And he says, "What great misfortune! I have simply tormented myself uselessly, struggling so hard for money that was not even intended for religiosity or material enjoyment." Generally, and Prabhupada says, generally the wealth of misers never allows them any happiness. In this life it causes their self-torment, and when they die it sends them to hell. So it's a really bad bargain. So, and then it goes on to explain that there's 15 undesirable qualities that contaminate men because of greed for wealth. And what time does class finish? Is it around now or? 9? Okay, a few more minutes then, bear with me. So these 15 undesirable qualities are theft, violence, telling lies, those scammers, duplicity, lust, anger, perplexity, pride, quarrelling, enmity, faithlessness, envy, dangers caused by women, gambling, intoxication. So the greed for more and more results in the duplicity and the lies, and we can see with the example I gave with all of these scam artists. And there's a saying I heard recently, I really like this saying. It says, "A miser isn't fun to live with, but they make great ancestors." Because they can't take the wealth with them, so they have to leave it to someone. And I remember years and years ago when I was living in Sydney and I was driving to work, and you have those massive, massive billboards, huge. And it was very interesting. It was plain white, and all the writing had on it was, "You are not what you own." And I'm driving to work thinking, he must have read the Bhagavad Gita, but I didn't know you couldn't tell what the advertising was about. You couldn't see as you drove past, but that you are not what you own. I thought that was, perfect thing for devotees. And a truly rich person is not one who gets more, but one who is happy with what he's got. So that hankering, it doesn't do us any good. And then in Bhagavad Gita 340 it states, "Thus the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire." So this is a very wonderful part in Bhagavatam, and it's something that will help us have our light bulb moments, help us. It's not that, we give up your jobs and you go on the dole, and nothing like that. We have our responsibilities. We have to take care of our families, our elderly parents, our children, etc. We donate to the temple. It's all a nice balance, but not that you're burning with the fire, that you've got to have as many shoes as Imelda Marcos. No, I don't want you to go home and count how many shoes you've got and then go, I better chuck some out. But, I remember as a younger woman, I might see, a dress, and I thought, I really want that dress. I could wear it to work and it looked really nice and blah, blah, blah. And then I'd get the dress, and then I'd come home and I'd go, it doesn't have pockets, or it doesn't look as nice as I thought it would. There's just, and that's a really banal, simple example, but there is no satisfaction in this material drive, this material lust. There's no satisfaction. You might feel it for a little bit. You might really love driving around in your new Merc or your BMW. And then what happens? Someone scratches it because they're envious. They take their key and they drive it along the side of your thing, or all the birds, you leave it out and all the birds poop on it, or there's always something you can count on it. But here in this verse, Prabhupada concludes that if we can become Krishna conscious, we can give up this heart disease. And I really like the way Prabhupada talks about this heart disease, and otherwise that disease of lusty desires will continue, and it burns our hearts. We'll be burning in that fire of material life. So then Prabhupada explains how to prevent it. There's two ways to prevent natural love of God deteriorating into lust. So the first way is if one is educated in Krishna consciousness from the beginning, then that dormant love, we all love Krishna, we all have an eternal relationship with Krishna, we've just forgotten. So when the child is gently, naturally seeing their parents, seeing their friends engage in devotional service, they will naturally want to do so, because that's who we are. We are Krishna's servants, and when we're doing his service, then we're happy. When we're not doing his service, we're not really happy. And then the other way is take hope, adults, it's all fine. It says that Krishna consciousness is so powerful that even a late beginner can become a lover of God by following the regulative principles of devotional service. So for the children, they're in that beautiful nurturing state, it becomes a natural flow for them. And for us adults, by following the principles in devotional service, we can also become free from this lust. And in 261 Gita, Prabhupada cites Sri Baladev Vidyabhushan, the great scholar and Acharya, and Prabhupada, when he was translating, he would always look at Baladev Vidyabhushan's commentaries. And he says, the senses can be completely controlled only by the strength of devotional service to Krishna. As a blazing fire burns everything within a room, Lord Vishnu, situated in the heart of the yogi, burns up all kinds of impurities. So we just have to stick at it. You know, we've got to be like those little, things kids throw at the wall, those sticky toys, and that sticks to the wall. Drives the parents mad, of course, but these are all things. And Mother Yasoda herself, in 10th canto, she says, "It is by the influence of the Supreme Lord's Maya that I am wrongly thinking that Nanda Maharaj is my husband, that Krishna is my son, and that because I am the queen of Nanda Maharaj, all the wealth of cows and calves are my possessions, and all the cowhead men and their wives are my subjects. Actually, I also am eternally subordinate to the Supreme Lord. He is my ultimate shelter." And Prabhupada says in the purport that following in the footsteps of Mother Yasoda, and because today, not this month, is Kartik, we can meditate a lot on Mother Yasoda and her love for baby Krishna, that whatever, if we follow in her footsteps, everyone should follow this mentality of renunciation. Whatever wealth, opulence, or whatever else we possess belongs not to us, but to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the ultimate shelter of everyone and the ultimate owner of everything. So these are all very powerful messages that we're reading in the Sastra, and putting into perspective can really help us gain that peace of mind. And because today is Narottam Das Thakur's disappearance day, just quickly in conclusion, in the Gora Ganadesha Dipika by the great poet Sri Kavi Kanapura, Narottam Das Thakur is described as Chamaka Manjari, a Manjari of Srimati Radharani herself, so we can meditate on him. And he's written many lovely bhajans that Prabhupada loved, just to name a few. Gauranga Bolite Hobe, Je Anila Premadana, Prabhupada loved that very much, Nitai Pada Kamala, Radha Krishna Pranamur, and Sri Rupa Manjari Pada. He's wrote many, but these are just few I mention. And his samadhi is in Radha Gokulananda's temple courtyard in Vrindavan. And I just very quickly want to read this short excerpt from Ramai Swami's website, ramaiswami.com. And he wrote a bit of detail about Narottam Das Thakur, so I'll quote here. Narottam Das Thakur wrote many devotional songs about the spiritual master, the devotees, devotional service, the six Goswamis, Gaur Nityananda and Radha Krishna. Although composed with sweet melodies in simple Bengali language, Narottam Das's songs give sastric siddhanta and devotional inspiration. And Prabhupada often sung these bhajans, and he considered them non-different from sastra. He quoted them in his Bhagavatam lectures as well. Pratana and Prema Bhakti Chandrika are Narottam's most famous books. And in this is from the Prema Bhakti Chandrika, Narottam Das Thakur says, Radha and Krishna are my goal in life and death, and they are the masters of my breath. Performing my bhajan only for them, I rise and fall in the ocean of prem. I pray that I can always maintain this conception within my heart as my highest ideal. So today we can meditate on Narottam Das Thakur. Maybe you could sing a bhajan or two that he's written, and we can meditate how if we focus that everything we have we try and dovetail and offer to Krishna, that we think about the borrowed plumes, not that we're the controller, the thinker, the creator, but we are, and the energies are all our borrowed plumes, and they act as long as Krishna desires, and they cease to function if he withdraws. And we spoke about Maharaj Jayanti and his realizations. We spoke about the lack of balance between sense enjoyment and the suffering. It's never the same. And we spoke about what happens when lust is unfulfilled. We get anger and, of course, greed. How Bhagavad Gita defines lust as the all-devouring sinful enemy of the world. We talked about the many faces of lust: power, control, accumulation of wealth, that it's a symptom of our rebellion against Krishna. We talked about the quota explained in Ishopanishad, that we all have our quota. We spoke about keeping a balanced approach, keeping our families peaceful and well looked after, and understanding that when we please Krishna, then everyone is pleased. And then we spoke about Avanti Brahmana and the 15 undesirable qualities of greedy, lustful people. And then we spoke about the 2 ways to prevent lust and how we can awaken our natural relationship with Krishna. And we spoke about Mother Yasoda's realizations. So thank you so much for listening. I don't know if we have time for any questions or comments. It's just on 9, but if you see me around, you can ask me. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope you got something out of the class. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.